One morning, James's driver came early to the shed. "There's a change of plan, James," he said. "We're taking the stopping train today instead of the goods, so we must be ready half an hour early." James was glad to be taking coaches rather than trucks, but he was not pleased about the extra hurry. "It would be nice to have a branch line to myself," remarked James wistfully. "You!" exclaimed Gordon and Henry. "Why not?" demanded James. "At least I'd know where my next load is coming from." "Ah," said Gordon knowingly, "but what about all of the trucks?" "And there's the shunting," put in Henry. "You'd have to do your own, you know." "Well," James hesitated. He had to admit that shunting was what he liked least. "Perhaps Donald or Douglas would do it for me," he began. "Or perhaps not," he finished lamely, seeing the pitying looks of the others. "Anyway, branch lines aren't so bad. I can't see why you don't like them, Gordon." "I like my freedom," said Gordon. "I need a good run for my wheels, scope to use my talents. You wouldn't understand, little James," he said grandly. "Pooh," scoffed James. "You only say that because you were once sent down Edward's branch by mistake." Gordon closed his eyes. His branch line incident was not one he wished to remember. Soon James's driver and fireman came for him. James puffed away importantly. Gordon and Henry exchanged knowing grins. When he passed Edward Station, James told Edward how much he'd like a branch line. "You can come and help me any time," smiled Edward. "With Boko away, I've been worked off my wheels lately." James sighed as he set off again. The rest of his journey was uneventful. James kept good time and was feeling quite pleased with himself as he set off for home once more. At the workstation, he met Gordon. "Found any good branch lines?" Gordon chuckled. James took no notice. "Just you wait," he muttered. "I'll show you." James came cautiously down Gordon's Hill because he had to stop at Edward Station. It was lucky he did, because just before they reached the platform, James noticed that the points were directing him into the sidings. "Stop! Stop!" he whistled. His driver quickly put on the brakes. James stopped just before the buffers. "All right then, James," said his fireman. "I'll ask the signalman to put us back on the main line. I won't be long." The signalman had to reset the points behind James, as the rules said. But when he tried to change them to let James out, he found he couldn't. He was most apologetic. "The lock must have jammed," he said. "I'm afraid James will have to stay where he is." "No, hang on. He can't. Edward needs to use that siding. You'll have to put James in the goods yard." James was not pleased, and neither were his passengers. Bertie came to take them to their proper stations. But James stood in the yards with nothing to do for the rest of the day. That evening, the Fat Controller came to see him. "I'm sorry, James," he said, "but mending those points is going to take longer than we thought. Meanwhile, Edward needs help, and since you can't, escape, you may as well do something useful." "Yes, sir," said James sadly. At first, James quite enjoyed it. But as time went on, knowing exactly what to do and when became rather dull. In fact, He was delighted when the points were mended and the Fat Controller said he could go back to the big shed. It was late when he reached them. Gordon opened a sleepy eye. "Hello," he said. "You've sorted Edward's branch line out then? That's good." James didn't answer. He didn't go as far as Gordon in thinking branch lines were vulgar, but he did agree on the subject of freedom.